Hi, y'all. There's this strange moment that seems to happen somewhere in midlife. It's the moment where you realize that you did everything you were supposed to do. You worked hard, you took care of people, you stayed responsible, and you kept going. And yet somehow life still feels unfinished. And I don't think Gen X was prepared for this stage of life at all. Honestly, I don't think we were prepared for many stages of our lives. Because nobody really told us what happens when the kids grow up. What happens when the career stops feeling meaningful? What happens when your parents start aging and you suddenly realize that you may have more years behind you than you have ahead of you? We're not old, not done, but we're definitely changing. And underneath all of that is this quiet question that a lot of us are carrying. Is this really it? Or is there still another version of life for me waiting out there? That's what I want to talk about today. I think a lot of us became emotionally functional before we became emotionally self-aware. What I mean by that is that I was raised by a single parent. My mother was widowed at a young age. And like a lot of Gen X kids, I was expected to step into the gap. I was expected to keep the house clean, even though I was only 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. 7 years old, I would walk myself to school and walk back. Now, granted, I lived in a very small town that was fairly safe. But I learned my entire life to figure out what people's expectations were and then live within them. That's until I got married. I got married and moved to another state, which shocked everybody. The marriage didn't last forever. That's okay. It doesn't for a lot of us. But after I got divorced, everyone was shocked again when I didn't come running back home. I stayed in that other state. I liked it there. But I was working in technology companies and I got laid off twice in 2 years and doors were closing there and I could see that. So I thought, maybe I'll go home for a visit. Well, it turned out a lot of doors opened and that visit turned into something different. My mother became ill soon after that. And she continued to have this on again, off again health crisis. So I eventually started to fall back under those expectations. When I lived in that other state, I didn't have anybody's expectations on me for the first time in my life, and it was awesome. And that's when I first started to dig into what do I want. But then I came back and stayed here for my mother. And then I made the decision. I'm just going to stay here a little bit longer until this is what makes sense now. And eventually it reached the point where as long as my mother's alive, I'm going to stay here. Well, then last year on Mother's Day, she passed away. And I spent the rest of that year grieving. But now I'm at a point where the job I work at, it's a really good job, and my employer dumps a whole lot of money into a retirement account. So I find myself making that decision again. I'll just stay here a little bit longer because it makes the most sense. Some of you may be struggling with the same types of issues. But I think we're in a unique position that a lot of other generations haven't had to face because we're carrying both the past and the future at the same time. We're caring for our aging parents who need that assistance, but also we have children who are entering a very different world than the one we did. And they may go to college or get a job and they can't make it on their own. So we as parents and grandparents have to step in and fulfill that for them. Can't really throw them into the deep end of the pool, even though that's what happened to us. This feels incredibly disorienting because you feel like you're stuck between generations and you don't see a way to do anything but keep soldiering on. Some of you are dealing with this type of thing while also feeling very burned out at your career. You know, I remember the days when I was very ambitious and I was ready to climb that ladder and ready to, you know, keep growing and getting better jobs. But that's not a priority for me anymore. Because just producing for the sake of producing has become exhausting. But you know, I don't think most of us want to escape life. I think we want to feel alive inside of it again. So that's why I started this experiment. You know, one of the things that I started doing a few years ago is I started writing books. And I published my first book in October. It'll be 4 years since I started publishing books. And that lit such a spark in me, just embracing that creativity. It's something that I had wanted to do for a long time, just never had done it because of this thing or that thing. But I gave myself permission to indulge myself and let's do this. And I found a resurgence of creativity within that. I've found my curiosity beginning to bloom. When I was a little girl, I was so curious about so many things. You know, and I finally got tired of waiting for other people to want to travel to the places that I wanted to travel to. And I started going on my own because I didn't want to wait anymore. So those are the kinds of things that I want to do more of. But in order to do more of that and free myself from the day-to-day life in my job that I have, I need to replace that income. So I'm looking for not just another job, but a meaningful way to bring income into my life. I want to slow down. I don't want to have to get up to an alarm clock every day and drive to work. I want to rediscover who I am and the things that I love. And I gave myself permission to start to evolve and do those things. So that's why I've decided I'm going to experiment more. I'm going to indulge in creative projects that don't seem to have any value beyond just fun. And I'm redefining what success means to me. You know, I'm not chasing the corporate ladder anymore. I want to do things that are fun, that are exciting, that make me feel fulfilled. You know, they say you should have a mantra in life, and every time you see the synchronicity on the clock, if it's 11:11, you need to speak that into being. Mine has been, I want to travel the world and have fun. How does that sound for a life motto? Maybe reinvention after 50 isn't about becoming something new. Maybe it's about finally becoming who we were underneath all the responsibility. If any of this resonated with you, I'd really love to hear where you are in your own reinvention story. I think a lot of Gen Xers are quietly going through this transition right now, but not many people are talking about it honestly. So if you're trying to build a life that feels more meaningful, more creative, freer, or simply more like yourself again, you're not alone. I'm here too. And if that sounds like the kind of conversation you want more of, you can subscribe and come along for the journey, because we're going to be having some fun.